3 years. That's how long Sergeant Xavier Robinson had been deployed when he finally drove up the gravel road to his family's cabin. 3 years of sandstorms and mortar fire, of sleeping in body armor, of missing his daughter's first steps and his mother's funeral. He'd survived. He was home. Then he saw the sign nailed to his grandfather's oak tree. Private property, no trespassing, Brookside HOA. His cabin, the one his grandfather built in 1967. The one that predated the subdivision by 40 years. The one legally exempt from HOA jurisdiction, had a lockbox on the door and a stranger's furniture visible through the windows. The confrontation that followed would take 18 minutes. The lawsuit would take 6 months. But the moment Xavier realized what had happened during his deployment, that took exactly 4 seconds of looking at his family's land, with someone else's claim attached. They'd stolen from a soldier while he bled for their freedom. Now they'd learn what happens when you assume absence means abandonment. Xavier Robinson was 32 years old and had served 9 years in the Army, 6 as an enlisted infantryman, 3 as a combat engineer sergeant. He'd deployed 3 times, once to Afghanistan, twice to locations he couldn't discuss with anyone lacking clearance. The cabin had been his anchor, the place that existed outside the chaos. His grandfather, Samuel Robinson, had built it on 8 acres of inherited land in 1967, a modest 2-bedroom structure where 3 generations of family had gathered for summers, holidays, and the kind of peace only wilderness provides. Samuel had passed when Xavier was 19, leaving the property to Xavier with clear instructions. This land is yours. Keep it in the family. Don't let anyone take it. Xavier had kept that promise. He'd paid property taxes from his military salary, maintained minimal utilities, visited when leave was allowed. The cabin wasn't livable year-round. No central heating, septic system that needed work, but it was his legacy, sanctuary. Then 8 years ago, a developer had purchased surrounding farmland and built Brookside Estates, 147 homes on what used to be tobacco fields, marketed as luxury countryside living. The HOA formed immediately, aggressive about maintaining property values and community standards. They'd approached Xavier multiple times about joining the HOA, which he'd declined. His property predated theirs by decades. He had no legal obligation. His attorney had confirmed it. Grandfathered property, no HOA jurisdiction, explicitly protected by county ordinances recognizing pre-existing structures. For 5 years, they'd coexisted. Xavier's cabin sat on the edge of the development, separate, distinct, unbothered. Then came the deployment orders. 3-year rotation with a 6-month extension. Critical infrastructure projects in a hostile region. Xavier had arranged everything. Property taxes on auto pay, the neighbor, Mr. Chen, who'd been friendly, checking on the cabin monthly, and all documentation filed with his attorney. He'd left in February 2020, returned in March 2023, and came home to find his inheritance occupied by strangers who'd somehow convinced themselves or been convinced that abandoned property could be claimed. Xavier had stood on his own land, staring at the lockbox, when a woman's voice cut through his shock. "Excuse me, you can't be here. This is private HOA property." He'd turned slowly. The woman, blonde, 50s, carrying a yoga mat and radiating entitlement, stood on his gravel driveway like she owned it. "Private property," Xavier agreed, his voice controlled. "Mine, I'm Xavier Robinson. I own this cabin and the 8 acres it sits on." The woman's expression shifted to confusion, then condescension. "No, sweetie, this property was abandoned and absorbed into the HOA common land 3 years ago. I'm Diane Hutchinson, HOA president. We've been using this as a community recreation space." Xavier felt rage building, but kept his voice level. Years of military discipline containing what civilian life might have unleashed. "Absorbed? This property has been in my family since 1967. I've been deployed overseas. It wasn't abandoned, it was maintained in my absence. We sent multiple notices to the property address," Diane said dismissively. No response. "County codes allow abandoned structures to be claimed for safety and community benefit. That's not how property law works," Xavier interrupted. "And I wasn't here to receive notices because I was serving overseas. Didn't the address on your notices seem odd? No mailbox response for 3 years might suggest military deployment, not abandonment." Diane's jaw tightened. "Well, the HOA has invested significant resources in maintaining this structure. If you have legitimate ownership claims, you'll need to take them up with our attorney. Meanwhile, please leave the HOA property." "This is my property," Xavier said, each word deliberate. "And I'm not going anywhere. I'm calling my attorney and the sheriff. If you're still here in 5 minutes, you're trespassing." Diane had pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police to report someone claiming false ownership, Sergeant Xavier Robinson, U.S. Army. Just returned from a 3-year combat engineering deployment, Xavier said, pulling out his military ID and property deed. He'd grabbed both from his truck the moment he saw the sign. Call whoever you want. When they arrive, I'll show them documentation proving I own this land and you're trespassing on it. Diane had faltered but recovered. We'll see what the police say about that. They'd said exactly what property records indicated. Xavier owned the land. Diane was, in fact, trespassing. And any HOA claim to abandoned property was invalid without proper legal proceedings, which hadn't occurred, but the damage was done. Xavier's cabin had been renovated without his permission. His grandfather's furniture removed and discarded. Family photos gone. The structure itself was altered with new windows, deck expansion, and interior modifications, all while he'd been overseas, unable to respond, defend, or protect what was his. Xavier sat in his truck after the police left, staring at his family's cabin. Violated, occupied, stolen in all but legal technicality, and felt something shift from rage to strategy. Military training had taught him, emotion loses battles, planning wins them. He called his attorney, James Mitchell, who'd handled his grandfather's estate and had power of attorney during deployments. James, I'm home. The HOA has occupied my cabin. They've renovated it without permission, removed family property, and are claiming some kind of abandonment right. I need legal options. James was silent for a long moment. Xavier, I sent quarterly emails updating you on property status. Did you receive them? I was in a location with limited communication access. Emails were sporadic. Then you don't know. The HOA filed a claim 18 months ago, asserting adverse possession based on alleged abandonment. I filed counter motions, but without your direct response, the court scheduled a hearing for, he paused, next week actually. They were trying to finalize while you were still deployed. Xavier's grip on the phone tightened. They waited until I couldn't defend myself. Appears that way. But you're back now. And adverse possession requires specific conditions, none of which they've actually met. You've paid property taxes continuously. I've filed opposition. The property was never truly abandoned. Their claim is weak, but they're gambling you wouldn't return in time to contest it. I'm back. What do I need? Deployment orders proving you were overseas. Property tax records. Testimony from anyone who checked on the property. Evidence that the HOA knew you were military and deliberately proceeded during deployment. And Xavier? We need to document every unauthorized modification. That's destruction of property, potentially criminal. Xavier had spent that afternoon photographing everything. The new deck, changed interior, missing furniture. Then he'd tracked down Mr. Chen, who'd been checking the property monthly. Mr. Chen, did you report to anyone that the cabin was occupied? Chen looked uncomfortable. I told the HOA president 3 times, said you were military, deployed, and asked me to check the property. She said she'd handle communication with you, told me to stop trespassing on HOA land. I'm sorry, I stopped checking after she threatened to cite me for violations on my own property. Did she threaten you? Selective code enforcement. Suddenly my fence was too tall, my garden too visible. I have a family. I couldn't fight. Xavier documented everything Chen said. Then he did something else. He contacted 7 other Brookside residents he'd known before deployment. 3 had been targeted by Diane's HOA enforcement. All were minorities. All had been pressured into compliance through threats of fines, guilty and selective rule application. By evening, Xavier had a pattern: aggressive HOA president, discriminatory enforcement, and deliberate targeting of a deployed soldier's property while he couldn't defend it. He called James back. I don't want just my property back. I want them investigated for everything they've done. Xavier, that's a larger fight. I've been fighting larger fights for 9 years, Xavier interrupted. They stole from a soldier during deployment. They targeted minorities with discriminatory enforcement. They violated someone's home while he served overseas. This isn't about one cabin. It's about accountability. James was quiet then. I'll file motions to expand the case. But Xavier, this could take time. I've got time now. I'm home. And I'm not leaving until this is finished. The court hearing was on Wednesday morning. Xavier arrived in his dress uniform. Deliberate choice, tactical messaging. Diane sat with the HOA's attorney looking confident. They had documentation of their abandonment claim, renovation receipts, and community improvement arguments. Xavier had something else: deployment orders, property tax records, and testimony from Mr. Chen. Judge Patricia Coleman reviewed documents from both sides, then looked at Diane's attorney. Counsel, your client filed adverse possession claims while Mr. Robinson was on military deployment? Your Honor, we were unaware of his military status. His property taxes were paid from an APO address. Judge Coleman interrupted. Armed Forces Post Office. That's exclusively military. You're claiming ignorance of military status when his payment address literally indicated it? The attorney stammered. We may have overlooked. You overlooked federally protected military service? Judge Coleman's tone sharpened. The Service Members Civil Relief Act specifically protects military personnel from adverse legal actions during deployment. Your client not only filed adverse possession claims against a deployed soldier, but occupied and modified his property while he was unable to defend it? Xavier's attorney stood. Your Honor, we have additional evidence. The HOA president, Ms. Hutchinson, was informed by a neighbor that Mr. Robinson was deployed in the military, checking on his property monthly. She threatened the neighbor to stop checking, then proceeded with the occupation. We have testimony and documented threats, and there's more, James continued. We've identified a pattern of discriminatory HOA enforcement targeting minority homeowners, including threatening residents who assisted Mr. Robinson. We're requesting the court expand this case to include fair housing violations and investigation of HOA financial practices related to the unauthorized renovations. Judge Coleman looked at Diane directly. Ms. Hutchinson, did you know Mr. Robinson was military? Diane's confidence cracked. Someone may have mentioned yes or no. Yes, but we thought after 3 years. You thought a soldier deployed for 3 years had abandoned property. Judge Coleman's voice was ice. Or did you think a deployed soldier couldn't stop you from taking what you wanted? Lintz, Judge Coleman made her ruling. Adverse possession claim denied entirely. Mr. Robinson's ownership is uncontested. The HOA will immediately vacate the property, restore all removed items if possible, and compensate Mr. Robinson for unauthorized modifications. I'm also referring this matter to the State Attorney General for investigation of potential SCRA violations and discriminatory HOA practices. She looked at Diane. You targeted a deployed soldier's property. You violated federal protections for military service members. And you attempted to steal family land while the owner was serving overseas. That's not property management. It's exploitation of service. You should be ashamed. Diane left the courtroom pale and shaken. Xavier left victorious but hollow. The full investigation took 8 months. The outcomes were comprehensive. Diane Hutchinson resigned under pressure and faced civil penalties for SCRA violations. The HOA board was dissolved and replaced with court-appointed oversight. Financial audits revealed $180,000 in unauthorized expenditures, including $40,000 spent renovating Xavier's cabin without legal authority. Xavier received full restitution plus damages. The State Attorney General filed charges related to the discriminatory enforcement pattern, but Xavier's victory felt incomplete. His grandfather's furniture was gone. Family photos irreplaceable. The cabin had been altered in ways he couldn't fully reverse. 6 months after the court ruling, Xavier stood in the restored cabin. It looked newer, cleaner, but different. His daughter, now 4 years old, ran through rooms that should have held memories she'd never know. Mr. Chen visited, bringing a box. Xavier, I found these in my garage. Your grandfather gave them to me years ago. Photos he'd copied, some old tools he'd loaned me. I thought you might want them back. Xavier opened the box. Photos of his grandfather building the cabin? Tools worn smooth by decades of use. A journal documenting construction, family gatherings, and the history of the land. He told me once, Mr. Chen said quietly, that this cabin represented something. Proof that black families could own land, build a legacy, and create something permanent. He made me promise that if anything happened, I'd remember that. I'm sorry I couldn't protect it better. You did what you could against someone who weaponized power, Xavier said. That's not failure, that's survival. Weeks later, Xavier was replacing deck boards when a young black family walked up the driveway. Sergeant Robinson? I'm Marcus Williams. I'm military too, National Guard, deploying next month. I heard what happened to you. I wanted to ask, how do I protect my property while I'm gone? Xavier spent 2 hours explaining. Power of attorney, attorney oversight, trusted neighbors, documented everything, and most importantly, know your rights under SCRA. They target us. Xavier said, military, minorities, anyone they think won't fight back. Your absence isn't a weakness, but you need systems in place that make it costly for them to try. Marcus nodded, taking notes. Thank you, man. Seriously. After he left, Xavier returned to his repairs, thinking about his grandfather's words. Keep it in the family. Don't let anyone take it. He'd kept that promise. Fought for it from across the world and in courtrooms. Protected what his grandfather built when forces tried to erase it. The cabin would never be exactly what it was. But it was his, defended, secured, ready for the next generation to inherit. Diane Hutchinson had thought absence meant she could take what didn't belong to her. She'd forgotten that soldiers don't abandon posts. They hold them until they can return. Xavier had returned, and he'd taught her that stealing from a deployed soldier doesn't just violate property law, it violates something deeper, the promise that while service members fight abroad, their home remains protected, their property secured, their sacrifice honored, instead of exploited. If you're in the military facing similar fights, know your rights. Document everything. And remember, your service protects others. Let legal protections defend you. Share your story if deployment left you vulnerable to those who mistook your absence for weakness.